Hey everybody, and we are here to talk once again about Wind and Truth by Brandon Sanderson. This is the 10th or 11th session? 11th maybe already at this point in time. I filled so many throughout the weekend as well, but I'm just unsure at this point in time. But we are talking about chapters 16, 17 and 18, I think. Alright, so we start off with the aftermath of the Shalon Adolin shower scene, which, I mean, I wasn't surprised that we were getting a fade to black scene from Brandon Sanderson. I was actually already surprised that we were getting a scene like this in a Brandon Sanderson book, but what I also really was surprised by is that there is actually a level of voyeurism to this scene, because basically Shalon's Spren, of course, are all witnesses to what happens, which makes me wonder whether this is always the case for Radiants. Like, it's not a very private life that they're living if their Spren are always like on the lookout, but I guess as well with the fact of like Spren being evoked by emotions, that I guess whenever they whenever Rasharians have sex, that they have like passion Spren, joy Spren and whatever erupts around them, which is an interesting image now to think of it. But so yeah, she's basically being like harassed by her super excited, you know, like what are they called? Shark plates, Spren? They're not called that. That's what I'm calling them. So we see her kind of have that little aftermath scene, but then she is meeting up with the rest of her crew because they kind of have to figure out an action plan for dealing with the Ghost Bloods, because of course she doesn't know yet that the Ghost Bloods already know the location of, cannot remember the name of this person. I kept on referring to her as a fused, but she's referred to here as an unmade, and I gotta say that I'm really dodgy about these differences. So I'm guessing the unmade is on a higher level than the fused, because these fused are basically sort of like Radiance, right? And so the unmade, I guess they're like the heralds to some extent, but I'm always a little bit dodgy on what these differences are. But so basically she has this meeting with her crew to kind of figure out what they're gonna tackle, and so they have now sort of like gotten sketches from wits of new Ghost Bloods that have made it into the city, and they're gonna be on the lookout for them, trying to figure out, you know, like what they're doing, because they suspect that they're trying to get the location of the unmade from her, and so that they will try to come after her family or her friends, her crew's family or friends, in order to try and get this information from them. And it will be interesting to see whether they try to do that, because of course if they don't try to come after Shalon and her friends and family, that'll become kind of suspicious, because that'll make Shalon suspicious of why aren't they coming after me. However, maybe they're really just not wasting time on that, and they're just like directly like ahead of the race at this point in time, going towards the location of this unmade's prison, I guess it is, right? And then something that I don't know whether it will come into play or whether it has any sort of like consequences, or like whether there's anything really linked to that, but then they kind of want her to play around with the plate, because Kaladin has been able to share his plate with his Windrunners, and they are also really excited to have the potential to share the plate of Shalom. And after some like testing, she is able to share the plate with somebody, but the plate then cannot move. And I like that when she was kind of done with that, when she stopped that test, the plate was kind of really embarrassed about the fact that it couldn't do what she had asked it to do. So I'm actually a really big fan of the plate. Shalon's plate seems super adorable. I also kind of like in that scene I also kind of like the sort of banter about Gaz, because Gaz is like the guy who was giving Cal a horrible time in book 1, and so I like that sort of like reference to that, and how Gas kind of refers to it as if like he's the reason why all those guys were able to become Radiants, because he gave them such a hard time that they were able to rise above. And then the others are like, weren't you just like crying last month about all the horrible things that you did to them and stuff like that. So I did also quite enjoy that little touch there. And so then we meet up with Dalinar in Cultivation, and that's where we left off in the previous section. That's the section that kind of got me skyrocketed in here. Unfortunately, the conversation with Cultivation. Come on, face. Yes. What is it? The conversation with Cultivation wasn't necessarily like groundbreaking or anything like that. It's basically mainly giving him guidelines and directions, and it's kind of making me fear maybe Dalinar will be the champion after all. I know that I've been like saying from the big get-go that Dalinar was not going to be the champion, because they're all saying it with such confidence that I feel like it won't be Dalinar. But now I'm like, maybe it will be actually. So Cultivation is kind of indicating that honor, which is actually like Odium and like Cultivation. It is a shard, but it can have somebody inhabit it. Odium is a shard, but it is currently Taravangian who has Odium's shard. And so if Dalinar goes down the path of figuring out these memories and these visions that Honor was sharing with him, that potentially he could get to a level where he can become the body, that's not a word for it, the vessel for Honor. And all of the conversation that happens within this little section kind of made me think like, oh my god, it is going to be Dalinar. So there are some conjectures I have here. First is Dalinar will become the vessel for Honor and will unite not the three realms as he did previously, but he will unite the different Radiants, and as a consequence be able to beat Odium because he will have the united force of the Radiants at his possession. But secondly, would potentially be that Dalinar becomes Odium's champion. Would that be a possibility? Would Odium be able to choose Dalinar as his champion? Speculation. I read somewhere, and I'll get back to that in a few minutes. I think this is in the next chapter, but yeah, I'll get back to that. So basically she's saying that he needs to go into the spiritual realm, which I think is also where Shallan is going, right? To kind of follow the path that he has been set on, and that way try to unite with Honor's power. And then he basically has that conversation with the Stormfather to put him up to speed about that, but the Stormfather seems very hesitant about Dalinar going on this path, seems to indicate that this is very dangerous for him to do. And maybe that has to deal with what I'm saying. Maybe the path is very dangerous and could potentially turn him like into a potential source for Odium? I don't know. And yeah, and then basically we leave Dalinar in the meeting room with like sitting in a corner with the bone, and Jasmine being like, I don't know, we'll find out what he's doing when he's ready to share, I guess. So next chapter we start with Adolin, who is also making his way up to that meeting and has a conversation with, first of all, the guards of Dalinar, who was left behind at the bottom of the stairs, and then with Yanagan, so the emperor of the Azish Empire. And I want these guys to be friends. I feel like they would get along swimmingly, and so they have a little bit of a conversation about, in the previous chapter Yanagan was kind of thinking about how he's just like a figurehead and how he would want to be able to do more for his people, and so that seems to have really stuck with him and become a part of his conversation with Adolin, trying to look at. But so yeah, they have a little bit of conversation about that, and I like how Adolin's like, this guy should be trained in sword, so maybe he's going to become a secret sword trainer. And then we see that at the bottom of the stairs, actually, Shalon is basically hiding in disguise, observing him, and they're kind of setting this plan in motion to kind of guard the different factions of their crew in disguise, and then at the same time kind of figure out whether they can find these ghost bloods. And she also gets a notification then that they have found one of these ghost bloods. And so then we go into the final chapter already, right, for this section, in which we see Adolin inside the meeting room, and basically he has some sort of hesitancy because there's some guy who last minute wants to enter from the Resi, what are they called? Resish? That island? Reshi? Islands, and I don't know whether we should be thinking anything about this, because there's importance placed on this, but sometimes Brandon Sanderson does this. Sometimes he adds stuff that to me seems really pointless to add into his books, and then it's just there to be there, just for him to be able to make a point about morality and stuff like that. So with this whole Reshi man, the sort of like hesitancy is that this guy is like the ruler of some sort of like super small island, and as a consequence, if he were like an Aletti or something like that, he wouldn't be important enough to be included into this meeting. But then they allow him in because they're like, regardless of how small his nation or whatever is, he should still be given the courtesy of being invited. So it says here, like, no cousin is so distant they stop being family. A king of a small land is still a king. And so that is kind of making a point about, you know, like, not kind of trying to compare the levels of power and just allowing all levels of power in there, but it seems pretty pointless to me. So that makes me go like, okay, is this the presence of this Reshi man significant? Is this a secret ghost blood? But then again, this guy would draw maybe a little bit too much attention to himself if he was a ghost blood. So you would more expect, if the ghost blood are trying to infiltrate a meeting like this, that they have a player in the meeting that is just like there more frequently, and that is not going to be noticed the way that this Reshi man does. So I think it's probably just like an inclusion to be able to talk about. That's the morality there of, you know, like not comparing the strength of Aletti with the strength of the Azish Empire, for example, or going as far as like the Reshi Isles. And so in that meeting, they're basically having their conversation about the agreement that Dalinar reached with Odium, and it seems to start out like hostile with Fen being like, yeah, your agreement allowed for them to now start invading my empire because they're trying to get as much ground into my kingdom as possible, so that by the end of the 10 days, you know, they will have gained some of my land off of me, and you know, you shouldn't have done that, it's your fault. And I gotta say, as a Dalinar hater, I was very much feeling Adolin here, who was just like eating it up. And he's definitely making a point. Brandon Sanderson is definitely making a point of being like, this guy, Adolin, is very sour about what has happened, and he is not letting go of this grudge. And so it really... So he really says, like, at one point, like, she was right, of course, but this was how it was with Adolin's father. Dalinar was a great man, yes, but he was confident in his greatness, which led him to assume he could solve any problem himself. This is what you deserve, father, Adolin thought, feeling the room turn like spears lowered at a captured enemy against Dalinar. You always barrel forward, doing whatever you want, consequences be storming damned, like you did years ago, killing my mother, and you never bothered to tell me. But then Yanagon interferes and is like, we asked you to stand for us, we agreed that you were going to be the one to do that, you found a solution to our problem, and thank you. So everybody else seems to be ready to move on, which I also don't really think is all that, like realistic, but okay, sure, whatever. But Adolin is having none of it. Adolin is definitely holding on to his grudges. And this is what I was referring to earlier. I saw a comment at the bottom of this thread who was like, I fear that Adolin is going to become like Odium's champion, that Odium will use Adolin as his champion against Dalinar. And all I can say to that is, if that is the case, then go Adolin. Adolin for the win. If it's Dalinar versus Adolin, then I don't care if it means Odium winning, but then Adolin has to win. No doubt about it. Adolin cannot die or whatever. Adolin has to survive this. So if Adolin ends up being Odium's shard, then I'm rooting for Adolin, okay? But maybe the opposite might happen. As I indicated, Dalinar might become Odium's champion, in which case he might have to fight Adolin, in which case we're also still gonna say Adolin, yay! Adolin is always for the win, okay? And so basically they're having that whole sort of discussion, and then Wit has like a fit, because that's when he realizes that the sort of like loophole that Odium is using, basically kind of inferring that if whoever holds the capitals is the one who is going to hold those entire regions. I don't necessarily see if I understand the logic there. He's basically saying that because Dalinar at one point was like arguing about keeping certain regions based on using their capitals as reference point. That's what I think, at least. That as a consequence, if Odium captures those capitals, he's capturing the entire region and not just the capital itself, which, I don't know, seems a bit dodgy reasoning, but it's apparently a loophole. And so this is also why he realizes, because Dalinar's like, yeah, but he wasn't going to try and exploit loopholes. He promised that he would just like stick to the spirit of the agreement and not just the letter of it, which, first of all, naive, but like, Dalinar is such an honor-bound man that he is so blind to these things sometimes, because he's like, you're speaking to Odium, who is this like source of evil, who has been working against you the entire time, and you're just gonna take his word for it that he will respect the spirit and not the letter of the law. But okay, fine. But so Wit in any case is like, yes, but that makes me realize that you promised this to Reyes, and Reyes would absolutely stick to this deal. Why? Who knows? But this makes me realize that Odium has a new vessel. That Odium is no longer inhabited by Reyes, and so they now know a new player is involved in the game. They don't know who, which makes him unpredictable, and which is what I've been saying about, like, using Shallan as a champion would make more sense, because Shallan is unpredictable, and to that extent she would make a much better champion than Dalinar, who's nothing if not super predictable. Yeah, and then basically the chapter ends with Shallan and her crew, as they found this ghost blood, and so they have multiple people in their team kind of trying to follow these ghost bloods, and so they find the new Ghostblood stronghold, and so they set up a plan that they're going to try and infiltrate the Ghostbloods. And I do enjoy the fact that she's kind of sad about being pitted against Reyes, because he has been a sort of mentor to her, and every single mentor she's ever had, she kind of feels like she's been pitted against. But I feel like she is definitely like forgetting about Jasna in that, because Jasna was also definitely a mentor to her, and while she does not appear to be very close with Jasna in any case, and ever since book 1 I don't feel like we've seen much interaction between her and Jasna. Definitely she was also a mentor figure, and so that's definitely a mentor that she still has around, but I guess she but yeah, maybe because she doesn't really have a strong feeling for her the way that she might have for these others, that's why she's forgetting about Jasna, or what? I mean, that's what that implies, of course, if she's not thinking about Jasna. Or maybe she's just like lamenting the fact that so many of her mentors have gone down this path, not necessarily the fact that all of them have. But so yeah, that's it for this section. I'm still waiting for my Cal section. Kaladin's name was in that lift as well, and I absolutely want to read their sections, but I don't think I will do so tonight, because then I would also have to film my reaction to it tonight, which it will be a little bit too late, so I'll have to wait a little bit for later within this week to read that. But I want Cal, okay? Can you just give me some Kaladin chapters? That's all I need. But so yeah, with that, I'm ending this week's video. Definitely let me know if you have any further thoughts on this. As always, the speculation about the champion is continuing. I'm starting to fear more and more that it will indeed be Dalinar, but I'm still hopeful that it won't be. I just, like Adolin, I begrudge Dalinar everything at this point in time. And it's not even that Dalinar is such a horrible character. I don't know why I have such a grudge against him at this point in time, but I really begrudge him being the center of attention and being like the one who is like at the top. But mainly I begrudge him this sort of like the level of like the lack of doubt about who the champion is be. That's the main thing. Like, he for not a second hesitated and was like, I'm the champion. I'm gonna be the champion. I'm like, what? Just think about this. Talk to your fellow Radiants. Discuss who should be the champion. But no, he immediately was like, oh, of course, I'm of course going to be the champion. And that's mainly the moment in which I was like starting to begrudge him everything. And that's why I don't want him to be the champion, because he was so convinced that he had to be the champion. And if he is going to be the champion, I kind of want him to fail because of this. So yes, it is a bit petty, I will agree, but yeah. It is what it is. Those are my feelings about Dalinar, so yeah. Let me know if you're a fellow Dalinar hater, I guess. Or I guess defend his honor in the comments if you are a Dalinar lover. And then my apologies for all of my hate directed at him throughout this particular update. But so yeah, with that I'm ending this particular update. See you guys for the next one, when we'll be tackling the next 2 chapters within Wind and Truth. Bye!